Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin. Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, a serial technology entrepreneur, published author of the Amazon bestseller Fail Hard, Win Big, and CEO of Sonatafy Technology, a custom software development company that provides AI-accelerated software delivery with accountability, accuracy, and speed, using a mix of both U.S. and LATAM-based resources. Today, I am joined by William Steenbergen, who is a data scientist, engineer, graduate researcher at Stanford, and co-founder and CTO of Federato. We're going to have some fun today. I'm looking forward to this discussion. William, welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Did I get your last name right? Steenbergen.
Not quite. It's really Steenbergen, but Dutch is pretty hard. It's I don't think I've ever met anyone that is not a native Dutch speaker who can do it. So it's all good.
All right. Well, I appreciate you making me feel better about that. Now, so you're co-founder and CTO of Federato. You've been doing that for almost 6 years. Tell us about it and what you guys are doing.
Yeah. So Federato is basically a software company. We started it about 6 years ago, as you said, and we're the only AI native platform that fully covers the full policy insurance lifecycle. And so really what that actually means is, large insurance companies, right, they receive email submissions all the time saying, hey, looking for this sort of coverage. Our platform automatically ingests those submissions, then uses AI to rate those policies and submissions, quote them, right? And then ultimately bind and renew those policies. And so really helping insurance companies to automate a lot of their tasks, but also do a better job at actually managing their portfolio and ultimately having a better book of business, right? We spun it out of a lot of natural catastrophe research. So our initial ideas were a lot around managing portfolio and portfolio optimization, but we now do pretty much everything that has to do with underwriting and insurance. So it's been a journey for sure.
And so it's all types of insurance, from personal property, business.
It's mostly commercial insurance and mostly focused on P&C. So think about property, general liability, workers' comp. It really ranges anything within commercial insurance, but more commercial than personal.
Okay. So you don't have to be an expert in the insurance industry to know that efficiency, automation, AI is needed. What prompted you to start this company?
Yeah, great question. So, at Stanford, we're doing a lot of research around big projects or big problems in the world that we wanted to solve. And one of the things that caught our eye was this problem called the coverage gap. The coverage gap is basically defined as the total economic losses and damages that are not insured, right? And it turns out that over the last 10, 15 years, the coverage gap has been increasing exponentially, which is obviously pretty bad, right? It just means that a exponentially number of businesses and people are not insured against the losses that they have and therefore likely going out of business, right? And we wanted to do something about that. So we actually, we locked ourselves up in the middle of nowhere in Idaho for 6 months just to ask questions and hey, why is this going on? What's happening, right? And the more questions we asked, the more we just found that, the way insurance companies deal with this problem today is, I would almost use the word embarrassing, right? And we sort of realized that we can do a whole lot better. And that's when we started. And, you start with one customer, you raise a little bit of money and you start growing more and more. And suddenly you're here 6 years later with a team of 150 people, around over $100 million from Goldman Sachs and a lot of customers, right? And there's a long way ahead of us, but it's been a journey for sure.
Well, what amazing progress in an industry that needs it. What's an insurance industry myth about underwriting, and what typically breaks when you try to modernize it or use AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think people don't realize how manual a lot of this still is, right? Some of our customers our biggest competitor sometimes is Excel, right?
Wow.
That's what we're replacing, right? And so, I don't think people realize that multi-million-dollar policies, right, are still underwritten on Excel spreadsheets and manual lookups and things like that, right? And I think it's pretty scary when you start looking at what's going on there, and nobody actually manages their portfolio, right? Underwriters look at things deal by deal often, right? And they're struggling to actually put things into perspective, right? Which given the increase in number of wildfires and floods and hurricanes and all those things that are clearly correlated, right, across a specific geography, it matters more and more, but that's not happening, right? No one is looking at that being like, hey, are we overexposed in this area? And then actually acting on it, right? That's the hard.
So what's the typical industry time to underwrite versus the timing that your software and platform delivers?
Yeah, so it depends a lot on the complexity of the risk, but we're seeing our customers go from, 30 days to actually send out a quote to like a day or even like 6 hours, right? And so there's a huge advantage, but it's not just efficiency, it's also better decision making, right? And one of the things is obviously like, well, making better, doing things faster and saving time, but a lot of it is actually more around making sure that they're taking in the rest of the portfolio into account when they're making these decisions. So it's really both.
30 days to less than 1 day. That is
I know
some
it's,
great
but the
efficiency.
bar's pretty low, right? I mean, if you do everything in Excel, it's not hard to solve for, right? And so, I remember like I was a researcher in reinforcement learning and we were doing all these fancy algorithms, right? And so when you start a company, you're like, "Oh, I can only use all that knowledge to build this, right?" And you then step into the reality and you're like, you know what? I think a simple like like convex optimization problem or linear regression could, already outperform what they're currently doing by like 10x, right? And like I always tell people like try and keep it as simple as possible. Don't get distracted by any fancy algorithms, right? Because a lot of the times it's not worth it. It doesn't make sense, right?
Well, I with a powerhouse like Goldman Sachs as one of your primary investors, you guys have clearly had great success. Are there I and not knowing the specifics of underwriting for commercial P&C, but are there stats of like accuracy of the underwriting that your platform is producing versus what the traditional manual outside of
Yeah.
the huge 29-day time save?
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the things that we look a lot at is how often do underwriters spend time or how much time do underwriters spend on submissions that are quote unquote in appetite? And what in appetite really means, it's like according to our underwriting guidelines. These are risks we want to write, right? They fit nicely in our portfolio. And what we're seeing is that after Federato, like after using Federato, underwriters are spending 3.6 more time on submission that are like in appetite versus what they were doing before, right? Because before they were reading manual guidelines of 100 pages to be like, is this something we want to write or is it not? Does it fit in a portfolio or does it not, right? And they weren't wasting their time on it, they were just going, right? And after Federato, we actually triage it for them, right? And then help them underwrite the right deals, right, at the right time to do that. So yeah, it's faster and like free. I don't know if the word accurate is right, but it's more in compliance with their strategies, right? With their underwriting strategies.
So where do you draw the line of AI assisting an underwriter in making decisions and what governments you have in place?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Insurance is very interesting because it's a very regulated industry, right? But if you start thinking about like what actually happens, it's parts of it are regulated, but then there's a lot of human involvement, right? Where underwriters go and look at these risks and try and assess it, right? And try to figure out like, hey, where do we go beyond or where are there details that I know, but an algorithm or our rating engine does not, right? And your rating engine, so for people who are not as familiar with insurance, right? A rating engine is effectively like a pricing algorithm, right? And these pricing algorithms actually need to be filed with the state, right? So you need to like define, hey, this is how we price our policies, right? But then a human, an underwriter, goes on top and says, hey, I know that this is what our rating engine says, but I know this and I'm actually going to apply 20% credit, right? I'm going to make it 20% cheaper because I know that this actually is a good risk for us, kind of thing, right? And so really what for us it's starting to be about is like we are not changing the pricing engine, right? Because that thing is foul. That has a lot of regulations, right? What we're doing is actually making sure that the underwriters have the right information and are guided to make those right decisions in terms of their discretion. And that's where there's not a lot of regulation, right? And so when we think about it, it's like really enabling underwriters, but we're not trying to replace them, right? So looking at sort of where is that line? So what can we do to allow underwriters to actually spend their time on underwriting versus underwriters spending time on manual data input, reading emails, right? All these silly things that like is really not underwriting, right? And so like we're trying to replace the work that is truly not underwriting and make sure that underwriters are truly only spending their time on underwriting. And I think that's really the story of it.
Amazing. Do you have a lot of competitors in this space with similar products or platforms?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. There is, I would say, almost two trenches of competitors, right? On the one hand, you have, we sort of refer to it as the old core, but these are 6 or 7 companies who, on average, are 35 years old and are built out of 90 plus acquisitions and sort of seem to be collaboratively owning what a lot of people would call the policy admin space, right?
Okay.
And we're in that regard as well, right? But obviously, we're the only one that's actually AI enabled, right? And is built from the ground up with an understanding of AI, right? And so those are really big players, right? Those are publicly traded multi-billion-dollar companies, right? And on the other hand, you have what I look at as these point solutions, which are very focused on just components of the policy lifecycle, right? Really good at ingestion, or really good at like wildfire modeling, or really good at like one specific thing, but they don't own the full lifecycle, right? And so we sit sort of like in between, like even in like size. And when you think what we do is like we do the entire life cycle, right? We're not a point solution, we're a platform, right? But we're actually AI enabled, right? And obviously a lot more modern software than the sort of like the old core, right? And so that's where we kind of sit in between. I would say that the old core is probably a bigger competitor for us because they have more similar products, right? Than the small point solutions. But yeah, that's really what the landscape looks like.
Well, tell us about your amazing engineering team that's pulling this off. How many engineers do you have? What is your work model?
Yep. Yeah. We have about a little less than 100 engineers, I think, at this point. And we've done something really interesting, I think, that seems to be more common. I've seen it more lately, especially in AI-driven companies, where we split up the engineering team in a FDE organization, so a forward deployed engineering organization, and a more product focused organization, right? And so the product organization is really the team building the platform, right? And ultimately building the building blocks that then the FDEs, right, the forward deployed engineers use to configure and like get our customers live. And we've gone through a very interesting transition last year where we always used to have like one engineering team until we had like 30 engineers. And those engineers were both building the platform and using it to implement our customers. And on the one hand, that was actually really great because the feedback loop between our customers and our product was like instant, right? Because the people who would like spend time with the customer and like actually do the configuration were like the same people who built the platform and built those building blocks, right? But, as you can imagine, those are very different skill sets, right? Like being able to talk to a customer and lead an implementation, very different skill sets from building a product, a really good product. And it's so about last year, which mind you is like 4 years into our company, right? We decided to actually make this change and split it up, right? And that's been very good because now we have much more specialized roles, but it creates another pole in the telephone line, if you will, right? To make sure that that communication and that feedback loop between our customers and our product keeps happening. And so that's obviously the challenge you create. But it's been very interesting seeing that grow and seeing how that team shapes itself.
Now, are your engineers remote? Do you guys have office locations? What's the work model?
We're all remote. So we are all across the US and Canada. And then we have some folks in London as well. But yeah, we're all remote. We bring the teams together 2 times a year, like everybody, right? So, I think we're heading to Orlando to Disney World actually in January, which
Nice.
should be really fun. Yeah. But yeah, it's all remote. And then on top of that, what we love doing is getting very small groups of people in person and just crank something out. Very focused, right? And so, I'm actually at one of those events here today, but we literally get like 6 product engineers, a product manager, a designer in one room for a week, and you basically work day and night. Like there's not a lot of sleeping, right? And just focus on one feature and you just crank that thing out, and that seems to be creating a lot of efficiency, right? And quite frankly, it's also just a ton of fun, and it brings you back to
It's
like a
hard to beat
hackathon kind of thing.
it's
Yeah,
hard to beat in-person whiteboarding and collaboration.
percent. Yep. So we really encourage people to spend on traveling, get people together. Like we give people a lot of freedom in that regard. And sort of the way we look at it is like we don't have to pay for offices. So, if you look at it, like giving people a credit card to just go and buy their flights and book hotel rooms, right, is cheap if you don't have to pay for offices, right? And so
Sure.
it works really well. Yep.
So you have a large, sophisticated engineering organization. What are some things that are slowing you down, and what have you tried that worked or didn't work?
Yeah, it's kind of weird to say, but I think growth is actually sort of like can slow you down, right? I mean, when you onboard a lot of new people, those people need to be onboarded, right? And they
Right.
need to you need to share that knowledge, right? And so that's obviously a challenge. And where everybody used to know the entire code base, that's not really the case anymore, right? And so heavily
You're
investing in
way too
things like
big for that.
yeah, I know, right? And I claim I still know most of the code, but sure, I think I do. Even I start to not know everything, and that's totally fine. By the way, I don't think I should. But it starts to become more and more important that you don't rely so much on humans, but you rely a lot more on your technology and your process, right? Where when you're a small team, you can rely on humans, right? Like you can. There's a small enough team that if someone makes a mistake, you sort of know who did it and how that can happen, right? And it happens less frequently. But if you're a large team, you have to figure out a way to rely less on humans and more on process. And you've got to find a balance between giving people freedom to just go and do whatever they want, right, and be successful, and actually building a process. And I think that's sort of the thing that, as we're growing, right, is constantly changing. And right, and so that can be simple things like just the standard CI/CD process, right, or testing scripts and things like that. But it can also be more complex, right? And so yeah, it's pretty. That's definitely a challenge.
In general, how long within your processes does it take to onboard an engineer and have them be productive?
Good question. I mean, I really target and try to have people like log a PR in like the first week or two of them joining us, right? But obviously by then they're not fully onboarded at all. And I would say it takes more probably like 3 or 4 months, right, for people to like truly start to be like really productive. And I think there's been a lot of tools around documentation, right? A lot of tools around providing videos and things like that. But it still takes a human a little while to actually ingest information and get that right. And so, yeah, it ranges a little bit from role to role, but probably the timeline we're seeing.
I have to imagine that you have an extraordinarily complex environment that to understand all the pieces and be able to really get in there takes time. Is there anything you tried to speed that up that didn't work?
That's a good question. I think like at one point we tried what we did is we'd had the product engineers when they would join, they would actually spend their first quarter in the FDE organization, right? So they would spend their first quarter actually working directly with customers to learn from customers and actually get like, hey, what does it feel like to be in the fields? Like use the product, right? Like and understand the edges of it. And I think in theory that worked really well. What it started happening was these people would get embedded into the FDE organization. They would start doing things. And then when the quarter was over, they were like, shit, like this implementation is dependent on this engineer. I can't move the engineer out of this now and actually put them back into product where we hired them for. Right. And it sort of started to become really hard. And I think ultimately we sort of figured out that that doesn't scale, or it's really hard to keep managing that because it just creates a really weird resourcing problem that just didn't work out. And now we just have people, be a product engineer right from the get go. But that definitely didn't go successful immediately. Yeah.
No, but I mean, trial and error of trying things, not being afraid to fail is a big part. Um, what what process changes have you guys done that's had the biggest improvement in delivery, quality, alignment?
Yeah, I think a lot. I mean, we've obviously had to like formalize a lot of things you would probably expect. One of the more interesting, technical processes that we changed is we used to, as an organization, push our new product efforts, right? So our new product releases on a bi-weekly basis, right? So we'd work in 2-week sprints. And at the end of a sprint on Thursdays, we would basically push our new product, right? Or all the new PRs that were merged into the lowest environment. So we have multiple environments per customer, right? There's usually some dev environment, a UAT environment, and a production environment. And we push all those new product changes into the lowest environment per customer on a biweekly basis. What we found is that as we had more engineers, that stopped working because there was too much going on and there were too many projects, and not all these projects were actually ready to be pushed on a bi-weekly basis, right? And so now it's the end of the sprint. Half your product like things were finished, half were not. You do want to push it into like the lower code base, the lower environments, but it's just not fully tested yet. And we started to rush testing, we started to rush a lot of things, right? We started to make more mistakes. And I think what we realized is it's better to actually do it on a pool basis, right? And to actually have the instances themselves, right? Have the FDEs say, hey, I'm willing to update my lowest environment at this time, which maybe is like once a month, or maybe it is biweekly, right? But really think about it like, hey, when do I pull it versus like when do I push it? Which was a very, very interesting change that I think is worked quite well. And you always try to like create pressure for your product teams, right? Like as a leader, especially, you really try to sort of push deadlines on people because guess what? If you tell people to like do it in 2 days, they will do it in 2 days. If you tell them to do them in 5 days, they will do it in 5 days. Right? And so like you try and create the pressure, but by creating pressure, you can sometimes create a lack of quality,
Right.
and a lack of quality can really hurt you, right? There's been some research that actually showed that the later in the process you find a bug, the time to solve it goes up exponentially, right? So if you find something like before you log a PR, it's like 1 unit of work. But if a customer finds something because it actually made it to a production instance, now it's like 1,000 units of work because now CS needs to go and like deal with this bug fix, right? You need to go and do communication with customer and what happened, right? You need to go and patch it. You might need to go and patch it in other environments, right? There's all these other things that you didn't need to do if you had fixed it right at the PR, right? And so like seems to be an exponential relationship. And so the faster you fix something, the less time it's going to cost you, right? Earlier in the process.
Interesting. So I know before the show you were talking about your Friday demo days. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's actually one of the best things we've done. So every Friday at like 5 p.m. Eastern time, we do this thing we call demo days. And demo days is basically 30 minutes. You show up, everybody shows up, the entire company, right? Not just engineering. And you basically say who wants to go first. And people will show their hands and be like, hey, I want to demo something I built that I'm proud of this week. Right. And they just show it off. And it doesn't matter whether it's someone in engineering who built something, someone in CS that's just proud of an email they got from a customer or whatever it is. Right. But it creates a level of positivity and a level of like, hey, like you're showing off your work and people being excited about each other's work that has been really, really successful. And it's just really fun. And on top of that, it's a great way to share what we're actually working on. Right. And for people to go, hey, yeah, I saw that thing in demo day. Can I get that in my customer instance, right? Can I, in CS, well, oh, let me talk to that. I need to mention it to our customers, right? And so it's been a really cool way of both sharing knowledge and having people be proud of their work and show it off, right? And
I like it.
selfishly for
I think it's genius, and engineers need a push to open up. Just their
100%.
general demeanor and personality.
Yep. No, I agree. And like selfishly for me as a leader, people who like do more often demos, especially in the engineering side, like you can kind of tell like it's very common for me for like the high performers are usually the ones who are like doing the demos, right? Because they're the ones like actually showing it off and like actually getting something done, right? And so it's for me also a good like mechanism, and it's not everything, right? But it sometimes can be a good proxy for like, hey, should I be watching this person, right? And if someone never shows anything during demo day, that can be also interesting information, right?
Yes. So your company has grown fast. You almost have 100 people alone in your engineering team. How do you keep everybody aligned and being a fully remote company without endless meetings?
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty hard.
I need to take notes here.
Yeah. No, it is definitely very hard. One of the things that we've started doing lately was for the highest level of executives. So that's basically like 6 people who all report into either me or my co-founder to do what we call an X-ray. So on a bi-monthly basis, what we do is we all fill out this X-ray template. And basically what the X-ray template has you fill out is basically like, hey, what are my biggest challenges? What are my goals, right? And where do I need other people's help? And you literally spend the entire day in person, an hour per person, right, going through their entire X-ray and like basically like shooting at it, right? And by doing that, what you're creating is a good transparency, right, and communication around, hey, where are you getting stuck, right? Where can I help others? And how does what I'm doing affect the other organizations, right? And that allows us as managers to then go to our teams to go and define, hey, when we do this, that affects customer success in this way, or it affects marketing in this way, or something like that, right? And so that's been a really good principle for us that's been working. Um, and then the 2 times a year all hands is very important for us to get people aligned onto like the mission, what we do, right? And that's been a very, very good one as well. So that's something I think you'll always have to get people in person for that sort of stuff. And I don't think we'll ever stop doing that.
Have you had good luck doing it twice a year versus quarterly?
Yeah, we try to do it 3 times a year at the start of like when we were a little smaller, but just with the like amount of people we have right now and like how hard it is to organize these sorts of big events, right? It's I think 2 times a year is enough. You also have to like remember like when you take the entire team for a week, how do you deal with our customer support?
Right.
Right? You have to cancel all meetings. So it becomes expensive, right? Not just from a time perspective too. And so I think 2 times a year is the right cadence, at least for us. If people were a little closer to each other and it would maybe make sense to do it more often, but we're literally all over the place. Like I think we have someone in every single state in the US, right? And Canada. So yeah, that's just hard.
What's your biggest scaling blocker right now, and how are you tackling it?
It's probably hiring. Yeah, hiring is still hard. We're, at a stage where I think it's really interesting to join us as a company, right? Like we've just raised a huge amount of money from a well-known name. We're very much focused on AI. A lot of engineers want to work in that space, right? But, on the other side, like not everyone thinks insurance is interesting. I would tell them they're wrong because it's fascinating, right? But, it's not the first thing people think about, right? And so that can be hard. And figuring out that talent is hard too. And, I've seen more and more that like there's a lot of talent in places where you wouldn't expect it. Like we've actually had good success of hiring people that didn't even go to college, as this one example, because it's just easier to build things. And so it becomes more of a like, are you sharp, right? Can you think from a product perspective, right? Do you have good product intuition? Are you a good communicator, good collaborator? And it's almost less a little bit about like, are you really strong technically, right? And we test a lot for that. Yeah, it's not easy to find really strong communicators and very passionate people as engineers.
Very interesting. Well, William, it's absolutely fascinating what you've built, the trajectory you guys are on as a company. Congrats to you. It'll be exciting to see where you continue to take this. Before we wrap, what is your no BS advice for today's tech leaders who are trying to build, scale, or even just survive in these interesting times?
Talk to your customers. Don't overscale or overscope things. Don't think about scale from day one. It's useless, especially when you're a short like as a early company, especially when you're doing B2B. But I would say in every single case, like don't try to overthink. Like people, I think that's the biggest mistake. People move too slow because they overthink. Just go and do shit, right? Go and get shit done. I think is the biggest advice I would give people, and you'll figure out the scaling portion as you go.
I love it. I love it. Great advice. William, thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time. That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatafy Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.